Hi, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cynthia if you're new here, and today I want to talk about one of my absolute favorite duologies ever, which is getting a third book. And yes, I just called it a duology even though there's a third book, which I will get into that in a minute. But today we're talking about The Everking by L.J. Andrews. So to preface The Everking by L.J. Andrews, I'm going to read you the little summary that I wrote for it. I don't mind being so weird. I really don't. Like, I'm genuinely excited to talk about this book, and I'm starting to think that my excitement is just coming off as weird. I don't mean to be. So let's just get into the summary. For years, Eric, the Scarred King of the Ever Kingdom, has waited for his moment of vengeance against the man who killed his father and trapped him beneath the waves, making Eric a prisoner in his own realm. That is, until his enemy's daughter unintentionally breaks the chains on the Ever, giving Eric the opportunity to make her his own unwitting pawn in a dangerous game of revenge. She's innocent, and he's vicious. However, Eric will pay whatever the cost to get back what he has lost. Didn't mean to rhyme there. Unless she manages to steal his heart first. And L.J. Andrews, the author, did put a little author's note, and she said, "Welcome to the dark world of the Ever. I hope you enjoy the book and the deep, possessive romance between Livia and Eric." That is the reason for this note. Some might find early actions of our morally gray Everking the kind that blurs the lines of right and well brutal. So essentially, we have our morally gray villain, Eric, who wants revenge for his father's death. Livia's father has killed Eric's father. They also put a sort of curse on the chasm so that Eric could not cross the barrier. So Eric is the king of the Everseas Kingdom, which is, from my understanding, it's underwater, but I saw the map in the Everqueen and I was like, hold on, shut the front door. I don't know what's going on. But pretty much there's a chasm. Eric cannot cross it until Livia knowingly opens the chasm and Eric is able to slip in and essentially kidnap her. And like the author's note alludes to, the beginning of the story is a lot more violent than I thought, but I do also just want to say that it is a dark fantasy romance. This was my first dark fantasy romance. I've tried dark romance and it's not my thing. It's not my thing. I'm having flashbacks to listening to the audiobook of Hooked by Emily McIntyre and how just disgusted I was the whole time. So I was a little nervous going into this book, but I actually ended up really, really enjoying it. And even though there are kind of like dark elements to it, it's not a dark story. It's not a super violent story in the way that kind of dark romance is portrayed, I suppose. So I just kind of wanted to get that out of the way. So with that being said, Eric kidnaps Livia, and that's pretty much where our story begins. And I will say right off the bat, Eric and Livia have some fantastic chemistry, tension, banter. I'm here for it. But with that being said, let's talk about the plot. So my notes for my thoughts on the plot. It's pretty simple because this book is, I would say it is plot and character driven because the Everseas series is a spin-off of L.J. Andrews' The Broken Kingdom series. I have not read the Broken Kingdom series. It is 9 books. I'm very overwhelmed. I haven't decided if I'm ready to read about Livia's father as a younger, hotter character because I just see him as dad, not daddy. So I don't know yet. I haven't made up my mind, but I feel like I should. There's a lot of history there. Also, I'm very curious about a young Stieg. He's kind of a daddy now. I feel like he's definitely a daddy in the Broken Kingdoms. But anyway, this book is definitely a mix of plot and character based. I had a good time regardless. It could have been character based. It could have been wholly like plot based. I would have loved it. I did like the pacing of this book. I think something a lot of fantasy romance books can sometimes struggle with is the pacing, especially when it comes to the building romance between 2 of the characters in the book. I really liked the pacing in this one. There was a lot of good build up and tension, and it was a little bit of a slow burn, but it didn't start that way. And that's, I think, what I really liked and what made it just really interesting. Something that I did struggle with a little bit was the world building, and that kind of takes me back to the Broken Kingdom series, and that maybe I should have read it so that way I would have had more like background knowledge, so to speak, on this series, so going into the Everkeen, I maybe would have understood, you know, realms more, the customs more, the type of fae more. I did find I was a little bit confused with the world building, and even though I've read both books, I still don't know if the Everseas Kingdom is actually underwater. I thought it was, and then I got really confused by the map in the Everqueen book, and I'm just like, I don't know, maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I'm just having a really big, like, dumb moment because the world building just felt a little bit clunky. But anyways, moving on. So like I said at the beginning of this video, I didn't think I was into pirates. I went into The Serpent on the Wings of Night, not into vampires, but here we are. My mind clearly can be changed. Eric is a villain. He's morally gray. I think he's more villain than morally gray. He's been through a lot, all right? He just needs to get his way for once. And like, I understand. And then Livia is a fairly good depiction of like a strong, independent, fierce, but also caring and compassionate main character. I feel like there were a lot of different sides to Livia, and I really liked that about her because what we get a lot of from Eric is anger. He is angry, and Livia feels a little bit more multifaceted next to Eric, which I actually really enjoyed. And like I said, there was a lot of good tension. I will say, because I don't think it's a spoiler, but going into this book, Livia is a virgin, and I was a little conflicted about that trope being used because I feel like it can go sideways really fast. I still didn't really care for it, but I think the way L.J. Andrews handled that trope in this book worked. I did also like the side characters. I was very happy to revisit the side characters in the Everqueen. There were some side characters that kind of aided in the plot twist at the end that kind of disappointed me, but I didn't really see the plot twist coming. I don't know if that's just me. Sometimes I can see it a mile away and I'm literally just waiting for it to happen. And then other times I kind of sense it and I think I know. But with this book, I didn't really see the character that betrayed them betraying them. It kind of, I don't want to say it came out of left field. I think maybe there weren't enough hints or there weren't enough like clues to lead the reader to that deduction, but I didn't see it. I didn't see that coming. But like I said, this book is definitely a good mixture of plot and character driven. I really liked it. This book also is fairly spicy. There is like a spicy door scene. Jesus. Spicy door scene. There is an open door scene and a kind of open door scene and a half, but the smell was really good. I enjoyed it. I don't really have too many gripes about this book. I do kind of wish the world building was explained a little bit more, especially the types of fae, because it's kind of alluded that there are lots of different powers and abilities and things like that, but it's never really explained how they get them. With Livia, I assume it's kind of like genetic because Livia's father, Valen, is an earth bender, and Livia has the ability to heal the earth in the Everseas. So she's kind of like an earth healer. And I know that's because they are earth fae, but then you have other earth fae who have powers with the mind. I was just very curious about how those manifest, how they come, where they come from, etc. Overall though, I had a really good time reading this book. It was a lot of fun. It took me by surprise. I was very hesitant going into it because just that dark element of the fantasy romance. I've read a couple of dark romance books and it's not my thing, but this is not dark romance. This is a little bit of a darker take on fantasy romance, but it's still really good. And I think L.J. Andrews is a very strong writer and she just executes very well. And I also think she handles the tropes that she writes about really well. Like, I know earlier I mentioned I was nervous about, like, you know, the about Livia being a virgin and like that kind of trope. I think she did a really good job and I don't really have too many complaints. I do think there's lore from the Broken Kingdoms in the Everkeen. If there is, it went right over my head because I didn't read that series. And it's so funny, one of my notes I wrote, I absolutely cannot wait to get my hands on a physical copy of this book because I might actually draw little hearts all over Eric's name like I am 14 again. Oh, I don't know, Eric was a character that really grew on me. Livia is a character who's pretty kind of likable right out of the gate. You get introduced to Livia and you're like, I'm gonna like you. But then you meet Eric and you're kind of like, we're gonna see how this goes. But he really does grow on you, like really grew on me. And there is art in the Everqueen that I cannot wait to show you because it's really good. And I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but the Everkeen was very good. It was definitely one of my favorite reads of 2023. It got 5 out of 5 stars. I just absolutely had such a fun time. I cannot recommend it enough. If you like pirates, fantasy romance, if you're into the virgin trope, sure, good for you. Definitely read this one. If you like pirates, I already said that. I would say, if you haven't read this book and you're looking for a fantasy romance recommendation with slow burn, good spice, villain gets the girl kind of vibes, then this book is for you because I just had such a fun time reading it. I just don't even have the words. All I want to say is that I loved this book and I love Eric and Livia, but I feel like that's not a good enough explanation to you as someone who might not have read this book. And I just wish that I could just kind of like pluck you up and put you in my head and just replay all of my favorite aspects about this book for you so you could fully understand why I love this story. But I can't. So this is the best I can do. Hi, before I close out the video, because I realized that I forgot to talk about the third book I mentioned at the beginning of the video. So even though this is a duology with Eric and Livia, in the Everqueen, which is the second book of the 2 books about Eric and Livia, there is an epilogue and their story wraps up very, very nicely. LG Andrews loves this story so much, like the rest of us, and decided to include a third book in with Eric and Livia's 2 books. The Mist Thief, which is the third book, focuses on Jonas, who is Livia's childhood best friend, and his story with his experience in the Everseas. And I don't really want to spoil anything or give too much away from the Everqueen, but the third book focuses on Jonas. So even though it is the third book in the Everseas trilogy, it is kind of like a standalone in its own respect because the first 2 books follow Eric and Livia's story, and at the end of the second book, we really wrap up Eric and Livia's story, and it is a beautiful story. And so I'm very excited for Jonas's story, and I realized after I finished filming that I forgot to include that. So let's go on to the outro. But yeah, that's kind of all I got for this one. Like I said, 5 out of 5 stars, definitely one of my top reads of 2023. I am very, very glad that I chose to give this book a chance because it really did not disappoint. I had such a good time. I definitely recommend it. And like I said, I didn't see that twist coming, but it wasn't all bad. It wasn't a bad plot twist. I just didn't see it coming, so it kind of took me by surprise. But if you haven't read this book, I definitely recommend this book. It's on Kindle Unlimited. That's how I read it. I will link it below if you are interested. And other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.